Absolutely magnificent. If it's as good as this, you'll be doing well. I recently had an email from one of the viewers who said to me, I used to go to this restaurant 10 years ago in Sydney, I think she said down by the water. There's one or two restaurants down by the water. Anyway, she said they used to do this wonderful fried fish sandwich. I can't remember the name of the restaurant, but do you have the recipe? No, well, actually, I don't have the recipe. I'm sorry, because I can't remember it either. But, in your honour, I am going to do a fish sandwich, because I've always loved fish sandwiches. They're not something you eat every day, I understand that, you know, because they're not great for the waistline. But first of all, what I've got is I've got some lovely flathead, and I've just crumbed that. You've seen me crumb things a million times, just in panko crumbs. But what I'm going to do differently, because the ones that I've normally had, the sandwiches or burgers, or whatever you want to call them, they normally have tartare and a nice homemade ketchup or chutney or something like this. Well, today we're doing a Cajun remoulade. Not too spicy, just with some really nice flavours and some good fresh herbs. First of all, a tablespoon of fresh tarragon, love tarragon, 2 tablespoons of fresh parsley, 4 anchovies chopped finely, about a good heaped tablespoon of capers, which I've drained and then chopped, and a tablespoon of very finely chopped red onion. It's sort of like a Cajun tartare. It's called a remoulade, but it's sort of got a bit of tartare about it, hasn't it? And then a good teaspoon of Dijon mustard, 1 clove of garlic, and to that you then add a couple of spoons of ketchup, a couple of tablespoons. Don't make it too much because it ends up like that awful Marie Rose dressing. Remember that used to put on the prawns and things? They used to put so much spice and Worcester and all those kind of things in it that you ended up, you didn't taste anything except the spices. You certainly didn't taste the prawns. Anyway, 1 cup of good homemade mayonnaise, or you could use one of those American bottled mayonnaises, which are pretty good because they're not too sweet, and also a tablespoon of cider vinegar, and a few good splashes of Tabasco, as much or as little as you like. You can always add more later if you feel that it needs a bit more of a kick. And then all we do is just mix that up. The fish itself, into the fryer. I've just got some decent size pieces like that. I don't want huge pieces, of course. It'll do for this. A nice ripe tomato. Also got some nice crispy, crunchy iceberg lettuce. Now, I've got some bread in the oven. Let's have a look and see how we're going. Yep, looking good. So let's just cut that. Oh, that's a bit hot. Cut that in half. Oh, it's nice and crunchy, guys. It's so crunchy, it's hard to cut. And it is hot, trust me. You have to use good bread for any of these sandwiches or burgers or anything like that. It's nearly ready, and you do want it warmed. I've got some butter here. I also believe for this particular sandwich you need butter. Lots of people don't put it, they just put extra mayonnaise. Well, you can do that. You have my permission, you can do that. Let's just pull that out, because that certainly looks ready, doesn't it? I thought you'd like that. Make sure you drain it well. First of all, some lettuce, a tomato. No, I nearly forgot. I've got some nice homemade cucumber pickles there. You can use these, or you can use any chutney that you've got. You know, what would be really nice would be piccalilli or bread and butter pickles. These are sort of like bread and butter cucumbers. So they'll just add a little bit of magic to it. So we've got that. Then the fish, I think 3 pieces would be enough, wouldn't it? And of course, our lovely Cajun remoulade. Plenty of that, because that is absolutely delicious. And the bread on the top. And it's most probably absolutely nothing like that one you used to have in Sydney. But can I promise you one thing? It'll taste good. This is one of those lovely one-pot dishes. It's got some rice, it's got some chorizo, a few other bits and pieces. But it is a pretty simple dish. It's a pilaf of sorts, but you don't want it to be too dry. You know, you're not making fried rice here, so you want it to be, you know, have a bit of moisture to it. But it's one of those things you whip up when you come home and you feel like something fairly simple, but tasty. And you can't be bothered spending 3 hours over a hot stove. I know the feeling. I spent all my life over a hot stove. Right, first of all, some olive oil, just in a wok or a deep pan, and 1 large onion. Now, as much or as little garlic as you like. Now, we know me. I've got 3 cloves of garlic there, but you certainly could have 1 or 2. But I think this works really well with the chorizo and quite a bit of garlic. But that's just my thing. You know, don't write into me and say you use too much garlic. All you do is you don't use as much. Not that I used to in the early days. Actually, that's funny, isn't it? The early days, 22 years ago, when I first started on Healthy, Wealthy and Wise, I used to get letters saying, or emails. Actually, there were more letters in those days. Be honest, I'm showing my age now, aren't I? And I used to get them saying, oh, you use too much garlic. But then I think people started realising that what I meant was you cook to suit yourself, so you put in what you like. What I've also got here is 250 grams of chorizo, which is certainly a hot ingredient, as we know, and I've diced that pretty finely. So we're just going to toss that around just to coat it in the oil a bit, release a bit of its oil, which gives a nice colour, because it's got paprika in it, so it releases sort of some of the oil and you get a nice colour for the dish. And to that we then add a good teaspoon of smoked paprika and a couple of bay leaves. Now, just grab your basting brush, because that gets all the spices into the dish. And we're just going to toast that. The paprika, that is. The paprika. I love smoked paprika. It's actually smoked over wood, and you know, like the normal paprika is just dried on the, you know, on the ground on mats, and I find it harsher. This is sort of a far more mellow ingredient. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I do tend to use it all the time instead of normal paprika, but that's, you know, once again, because I like it. Into that we add 1 can, which is 400 grams of diced tomatoes. Bit of salt. Don't put too much salt in, because you may find that the chorizo has got quite a bit of salt in it. And a bit of pepper. Once again, you might find the chorizo's got some spice in it, which is pretty normal. And I'm just going to bring that to the boil. Actually, I had a competition with a mate just recently, because he's a smarty. He's a know-all. Nothing like me, of course. Anyway, he wanted to order some takeaway, and I said, nah, look, I'll whip up something. And I didn't whip up this exact dish, but something fairly similar to this. And I said, I bet you, and I think we had the huge bet of $2. I said, I bet you $2 that by the time the takeaway comes, my dish will be finished. Who won? I did. All right. 250 grams of basmati rice or any long grain, and 600 mils of packet chicken stock. Good quality, you know, top quality packet. What am I using these days? Oh, yes, the Mordo one. Beautiful. Very classy. And to that we will then add some grated zest of 1 lemon. Just using your microplane. Just careful because there's a bit of discoloration there. I don't want to use that. Didn't see that, I have to be honest. All right, guys, we're going to bring that to the boil, and I'm going to cover it fairly tightly, and we'll bring it to the boil, and then we'll turn it down to a simmer, and we'll cook it until quite a lot of that liquid's been absorbed and the rice is nice and tender. All right, 15, 20 minutes. Very gently, very gently. Don't bubble it away at 100 miles an hour. Just cook it very gently. All right, guys, I promise you, this will be finished before the takeaway arrives. And it's better. All right, this is looking rather good. Yeah, now we need to add some coriander, just some chopped coriander just to that. And also some fresh lemon juice. I put the zest in before. I now just want to squeeze a lemon too. Now, just a taste. Hot. And it's good, guys. That lemon just adds something to it. You know, the combination of the zest and the juice at the end. And gee, it's... See what I mean? It's moist, but it's not gluggy because the rice is just cooked, which is great. You don't want it gluggy. Nothing worse than gluggy, but you do want it still to be moist. All right, guys, here we go. That is a good, simple, fast dish. It is, and you will enjoy it. Trust me.
She's no stranger to travel. So when Alex Polizzi takes a left turn off the
30 on Showcase.
All right, a nice vegetarian dish with lots of flavour. An enchilada. I don't know whether that pronunciation's very good, but I was quite impressed with that. I sounded like I knew what I was talking about. Anyway, today, the vegetarian one, a really nice tomatoey sauce, you know, with lots of flavour. That's terribly important, particularly with some pureed chipotle. You buy little cans of chipotle in adobo, which is chipotle chilies, or peppers, chilies, in a nice adobo sauce. And basically, this is a cheese enchilada, but it's, as I said, it's got a really tasty sauce with it, and it's also got a coriander, lime, and chili crema over the top, which is basically a sour cream mix. But we use some vegetable stock for this, vegetable oil, Iain. We do use vegetable stock, but we use vegetable oil at the beginning. And a couple of large onions, chopped reasonably well. They don't have to be neat. 2 or 3 chilies, finely chopped. And also a decent amount of garlic. As I said, I want this to have lots of flavour, so I've got 4 cloves of garlic. And I'm just thinking to myself, what's a decent amount? I use that all the time. I'm always saying decent, aren't I? A decent amount of seasoning, a decent... I suppose I really should say generous or scant. Scant means just a small amount. You know, like a scant tablespoon is just a tablespoon. I am going off on a tangent here, aren't I? Anyway, I've got 4 cloves of garlic, a generous amount of garlic, and we'll throw those in. And we're just going to saute this until it's tender. So it's going to have a bit of spice because it's got fresh chilli and it's also got the chipotle and plenty of garlic. So it's going to be really nice and tasty. And I've got the cheese. Now, you can use that wonderful Mexican cheese if you can find it, but what I've done here is I've got a mixture of an extra tasty cheese plus some provolone. Now, I don't know what provolone is doing in a Mexican dish, but I find the combination works really well in this if you're not going to use the Mexican. All right. All right, we're now nice and tender, the onion that is, and I'm going to add 3 cans of diced tomatoes to that. As well as that cup of veggie stock and this good tablespoon of the pureed chipotle. I do like using a combination of the chipotle and the fresh chili. I think it always works better. It's up to you, but I think sometimes people put just chipotle and they put a heck of a lot of it in, and it sort of still has that slightly canned flavour to it. So I find the combination is better. That's just me. It's just me. So some salt and pepper, and all we're then going to do is cook that until it is thick and fragrant, and then we'll come back and do the other little bits and pieces. All right, my tomato sauce is looking good. Let's just have a little taste, or a big taste if you want to, whichever. It's got some real heat, but gee, that's nice. Now, I'm just going to throw in some cannellini beans, which I've drained and rinsed really well. Used red kidney beans. Just some canned ones are lovely. Don't have to get all excited. We're just going to cook that for a little bit longer. Now, just to heat those beans through. And while that's happening, we start thinking about our tortillas. Now, you can wrap them in foil, a whole bunch of them, and put them into the oven, if you like, just to heat them up, or you can do them like I'm doing now. And while that's happening, we're starting thinking about that crema that I was telling you about, which is a combination of sour cream and a few other little bits and pieces. Today it's sour cream, coriander, chopped, a little bit of chilli. Now, because that's quite hot, if you'd like, you could leave the chilli out. I'm talking about that mix there, which is quite hot. And just do keep an eye on your tortillas. I'm just wanting to soften them so that they will roll really easily. What I've also got for this crema is a fresh lime or 2, depending on how much juice. Oh, there's lots of juice in that. That's good. Just mix that together. Right. And keep an eye on those because you don't want to burn them. Now, remembering this is a dry pan, no oil in it. So it's just softening them. See how soft that is? It's nice and soft, ready to go. Right, let's start thinking about rolling these up. Right, so we've got those in there. Now let's just start thinking about our bean and tomato mix. All right, now make sure you put a generous amount of the bean mix because I want it to seep through to the tortillas themselves. And then, fine, don't put too much cheese. You don't want the cheese to take off because the star of the show really is the bean and tomato mix. Oh, and the enchiladas or, stuffed tortillas, whichever you want to call them. Now, I reckon 10 or 15 minutes, just until that cheese is melted and bubbling. Real simple stuff, but delicious, tasty, all those things that we like. And God, we're a great fan of Mexican food at the moment. I don't know how authentic this is, but the one thing about it, it is very tasty. All right, it's time to go. But just before I do, a quote from Gracie Allen. The first time my husband asked me for a glass of water and an aspirin, I knew exactly what to do. I rang my mother and I asked her for the recipe. Don't think she was much of a cook. All right, guys, see you soon.
I'll wear this ring until my sister can belong.
Until my uncle can belong.
Until my son can belong.
Until my cousin.
My mother.
My mate.
My brother.
Until we all belong.
This incomplete ring symbolises the gap in marriage equality we need to close. Wear this ring and show your acceptance of marriage equality. Act now.
Authorised by Airbnb Sydney.